Good morning and good afternoon for all of those that are joining us. While everyone loads on, we have just a quick few reminders that this session is being recorded, as well as if you are seeking CLE or CE credit, you must submit all three polling questions at the time that they are launched. And once the polling questions are closed, they cannot be relaunched. And the CLE Institute will be reaching out to you all directly for your information in order to get the CE or CLE credit. So please just keep a close eye out for that email in the next coming days. As well as that, please note that the first 200 registered webinar attendees that log on today and stay on for the full 1 hour duration of the webinar and submit all three polling questions will be the ones that receive the CLE or CE credit. If you do have any questions, please use the chat feature and put your email as well as your question, or email mchristie@constangy.com, and we will address the question at the end of the webinar. And if we are unable to get to your question, we'll connect you with our presenters via email. And lastly, if you would like a recording or a copy of today's deck, please email myself, Madison Christie, at mchristie@constangy.com. I'll also be placing this in the chat as well. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sean.
Thanks, Madison. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you very much for joining us this morning for our March 26th Constangy Cyber Academy session. And we're really thankful to have Bryce Blair with us from Arete and our own partner, Ryan Steidl, to talk about monitoring organizational AI usage. I, along with many other members of our team, for better or for worse, have a front row seat to the benefits and as well as the malicious use of AI. I'm currently working on a number of matters where we've had enhanced AI attacks on victim systems, and we know that how unfortunately effective and efficient malicious actors can be with it. At the same time, it can be used for tremendous purposes within our own firms if we monitor and use it well. And I can't wait. I'm really excited because of the front row seat we otherwise have to how it can be used. I really can't wait to hear what Brian and Bryce have to share with us today. So thank you very much, you guys, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. I'll get a little more detail. Ryan is a partner here at Constangy, and he heads up our compliance and advisory group, as well as co-chairing our AI practice group. He's based in Seattle. Ryan provides strategic guidance to organizations navigating the evolving legal landscape of data privacy and cybersecurity. Outside of work, Ryan is an avid skier, an amateur carpenter and furniture maker, and he has a growing collection of cookbooks, and he also organizes a party with a bunch of friends. I find this very interesting, who pick a cookbook and everybody has to bring something from that cookbook to the dinner party. So very cool. He's also been known to make his own tonic water. Ryan is joined today by Bryce Blair, the Managing Director of Digital Forensics and Incident Response at Arete. Bryce leads strategic and delivery across complex cyber extortion matters, overseeing incident response, forensics, threat intelligence, and advisory services. He serves as the key escalation point for clients, counsel, and insurance carriers, helping organizations navigate high-pressure incidents and minimize business impact. He has over 15 years' experience in leading investigations across multiple different industries, and early in his career was an expert witness and digital forensic examiner and network administrator in the United States Navy. Outside of work, Bryce enjoys playing softball and golf, and he doesn't have a dog. I made up a really good story with Bryce about his dog and how he likes long walks on the beach with his dog, but unfortunately Bryce doesn't have a dog. I'd like to welcome you both today, and thank you everybody for coming. I'll pass it over to you guys to get us kicked off. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sean and Yogi, for the effusive introductions. As seen on our overview page, we have a number of areas that we're going to cover today that speak to the various considerations and concerns and things that folks should have on their radar screens regarding monitoring organizational AI usage. And this is going to be a wide-ranging conversation because the topic itself of AI is quite broad in itself. So we'll be going through some ways about how to effectively discuss AI within your organization, some of the trends that we have continued to see and how those have shifted over time. And we're also going to be looking at organizational AI usage from two lenses. And Bryce, I'll let you speak to your side here. I'll speak to mine, and then we'll move over to the next section.
Sounds good. So my lane will be the outside in as someone that works in incident response. It's really where we'll spend my time there. And outside in is really about the external threat side, and specifically what we'll get into if your organization has implemented AI tools, what does that mean for your security exposure? How are threat actors targeting AI implementation? So Ryan hinted at it there a little bit, but just to drive it home, everybody, especially with AI being such a big topic, everybody has all kinds of questions and ideas and thoughts about how threat actors are using AI. We could have a whole week-long conversation about how they are. So we're not going to deep dive into everything. What we're really going to focus on more so is specifically how AI adoption inside your organization creates risk from the outside. And then to Ryan's point that he'll get into, he'll be hitting on the inside perspective as well.
Yeah, and Bryce, thank you. And to that point, be looking at this from the view of AI within the organization and what that means and how it impacts your business, your operations, and your reputation outside of the organization. And really, it comes down to preserving the trust, and that includes your employees, customers, third parties. So it's not just the security side and everything that Bryce is going to be speaking about, but there's a lot of people here who need to be stakeholders and involved, and all of those considerations need to be working together as we discuss AI. And that's a good lead into our first section here, which is how do we discuss AI? How do we have effective conversations and productive discussions with many people in the organization who come from different backgrounds, expertises, have certain concerns, priorities. And so we'll be talking about this in a number of ways. So to get started with, it's easy to get derailed because, as we've already mentioned a few times here, AI is a very broad term and it can be referred to a lot of things. And oftentimes people default to the term, or thinking that when we are talking about AI, that it's anything involving tech or anything automated, and those end up getting conflated or labeled as AI. But it has to be a bit more nuanced than that. And Bryce?
So it's a good point, Ryan. Once you get to the idea and accept that kind of everything is considered by AI, from a lot of people, the fix and really the start and beginning is getting your organization aligned to what that actually means to you to use the term AI. So when you sit down and assess risk or build a policy or figure out what you need to monitor, it matters a lot what you're talking about. Are you talking about a basic automation script or a large language model? The risk profiles on those are completely different. The things you need to monitor are different. The questions you need to ask are different. Ryan is going to get into the legal definitions more in depth. That's definitely not my side of the house. But it's important because how these tools are defined and how you're talking about them in your organization, how they're defined in law affects obligation pieces, but from a practical standpoint that my brain is capable of understanding. The starting point is just getting clear on what types of tools are actually in use across your organization, and making sure that everybody at that table is really talking about the same thing. So as we get forward into this, we'll talk about this from two perspectives. When it comes to understanding governing AI, we'll talk about a technical side. The questions are about how the tool works, what it touches, what it can do, what it produces, how much it operates on its own. Again, that's what I'll be covering. And then we have on the legal perspective here, the questions are a lot about obligations, liability, what is using this tool require you to do, and what are you responsible for if something goes wrong. These two perspectives don't always connect, and that's where the big gap and risk is created and tends to live. Engineers and IT teams understand the tool but may not know what triggers anything legally, and they probably never thought about that a lot of the time, mostly. And then the legal team knows about obligations, but may not be able to map everything out to actual system behavior. So what becomes important early on is getting both of these perspectives in a room together so that they can build a shared understanding. Everything that we cover today is really aimed at helping people do that. To help, I've even seen some organizations out of this setting up AI governance committees on their own that have reps from both sides. So it's something that we can, think about and speak to moving forward. So
and
go
Bryce,
ahead,
before you,
yeah.
I was going to say, before you jump into that, you mentioned, both of these perspectives working together. I think people sometimes see these two perspectives as just being in natural opposition to one another, but they aren't, and they don't have to be. I can speak to myself personally. I am extremely interested in the tech perspective and everything that Bryce has to share here today. And I want to understand it more so I can provide better guidance. From the legal side, we're also excited about this. We want to understand and use it, and we want organizations to be able to use it. We don't want to say no, we actually want to say yes. So I just wanted to throw that in there as a quick aside, Bryce, before we jump ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not big on corporate jargon terms, Ryan, but when it comes to it, healthy friction is okay as we talk through some of this. IT and engineers, they want to do everything, and you come with the actual perspective, slow down a second. So it's good. It's good from both sides and good to me. All right, so I'll walk through. I've kind of a few different categories here from a tech perspective because they have different impact on monitoring and governance. The first that you'll see here is traditional automation. We call that deterministic. They're scripts where every action is defined. There's defined inputs, defined outputs every single time. So they're predictable. You can audit them. They're understood. You can think about workflows that run on a schedule. So if you're getting something daily at the same time every day, there's a good chance that this is traditional automation that's been built. The second piece, we'll consider it modern AI. It's probabilistic AI. There you can think about natural language processing, machine learning, large language models. So tools that we probably all use every day, ChatGPT or Copilot, things like that. These are trained on massive data sets, really, and they produce, we'll say, the most likely output, right? It's not a guaranteed output like it was before with traditional. That's where the word probabilistic is doing a lot of work there to get what you want it to be. So it means output can vary, surprise you, or flat out be wrong in ways that you may not be expecting all the time. And then the third category, we'll call it AI agents. And this is really where the industry is heading quickly. Agents are AI systems that can take action based on their own outputs with less and less human intervention as we go on. So they can browse, execute code, interact with other systems. They can send communication. They really operate on their own as we move forward. So the key difference to understand as we move from traditional to probabilistic to agents, is that the predictability of them is going down and the risk is going up. So a policy and monitoring approach that works for an automated workflow isn't going to work as organizations are adapting AI agents on that front.
So looking at this from a legal perspective, I already mentioned it. We want to work with our clients and with organizations to say yes as much as possible to really explore the capabilities of artificial intelligence, but ultimately doing so in a way that is going to be safe and preserve the reputation of that organization. Because I think we've already seen and are very aware of the many horror stories out there about how it can go wrong. And again, this, because we're talking about having a productive conversation. I wanted to kind of use this as an example of, talk about a few things about what your conversations can include to be very helpful. And some of that starts with what is being used exactly. We already talked about artificial intelligence can sometimes be a nebulous term. And, when legal is asking, about the tool and the technology and whether it qualifies as artificial intelligence, we're doing so because there is some variation in the definitions that are currently being used. And I just want to use this as an example because the way the tool is structured, how it's being used, can impact the decisions, the advice, and the guidance, or the controls and the protections that need to be put in place. And so I'm just going to quickly walk through here. So Bryce, if we go here, we start off with, definitions, which largely align across, the three examples that I pulled here from, U.S. federal, some of the representative state laws, and then the EU AI Act, which is kind of the leading or premier AI regulation on a global level. So, if we look at here, then we move on to the next set of considerations, which is the level of autonomy. And as you can see, in some cases it's covered, other places it's not. Or in the case of the EU AI Act, it's even modified to go even further and has these additional qualifiers. We look further about some of the inputs in the next set of definitions here about what is going in, human defined objectives under the federal law, or explicit or implicit objectives under these other two. So already there, you can start to get into some nuances and discrepancy, and then we start talking about how it functions as the next thing that we're looking at in terms of predictions, recommendations, or decisions, or inferring and generating outputs, or combinations, predictions, recommendations, or decisions. And then you look further as far as the impact that goes here in terms of, influencing, say, real or virtual environments under the federal law, and under Utah's definition versus influencing physical or virtual environments under the state laws. So again, this is not meant to just sort of make you experts on what the definition is, but if we put it all together and look at it as a whole, you can see that even when we're just talking about what artificial intelligence is, we have a lot to get through to just make sure that we're on the same page. So if we go ahead and get past the what side, then we have to start talking about how it's being used. And a good example of the distinction here is AI versus automated decision making. So AI, and I use Colorado just because it's a pretty good representative law, and it's identical to some of the others like New York, where there's a lot of impact and activity happening right now. So the Colorado AI Act is focused on what they call high-risk artificial intelligence systems whose deployment is used for consequential decisions. What that ultimately comes down to is, will AI, with minimal human intervention and input, be used to make decisions that can have a big impact on someone's personal life? Things like their employment, on housing opportunities, credit and insurance, financial, health decisions, legal services, etc. And then we look at the California definition of automated decision-making technology, which was just as part of that big rulemaking package that finally came out at the end of 2025. And it talks about, technologies that make decisions or that a person relies on to make a decision. They also include things like such as profiling and evaluating individuals and analyzing aspects about them, such as their personality, interest, behavior, location. And when you look at the two of these together, they look very, very similar. But they're not the same. Even Cal Privacy, who put out those rules, and you can see the link here if you wanted to go look, states very clearly that artificial intelligence can be automated decision-making technology, but not all AI is ADMT. And so again, this is where, making sure that you are, we're having these very open conversations, and, some of these questions, they may be extensive and they may feel redundant or silly, but really it's because the regulatory landscape and understanding and policy is still in its very early stages and very much in flux, that there's a lot to understand in order to make sure that we're making the right decisions here. And so then that leads into the final example about responsibility. And this is something that I think a lot of people are really keen to understand here, because we're all excited to use it. We want to move fast. We want to be competitive. But we have to be careful and think about potential responsibility, who owns it and who might own it if something were to happen. And so a few things to be thinking about when you're evaluating new AI tools and technologies, and the conversations that you may have with legal, and things that you can be bringing in preparation for those conversations to be productive. And again, this is looking at it from an internal perspective. Bryce is going to speak to the external perspectives too, but one thing in particular is you might hear things like private instances of AI, and that term private may make you think of certain things, but that's not always the case. Private may not necessarily mean private the way that you think about it. And that's important to know, because use of AI tools or public AI tools and putting things into, say, the big ones that are out there, unless it's the enterprise version and you have an NDA, it can break confidentiality or attorney-client privilege. They may also, not be automatically compliant, even if you do have an instance in your organization. But ultimately, you want that because it makes it much easier to maintain compliance and control data. And oftentimes, those private instances, and I'm just using the word private for consistency here, may be the only legally safe way to use AI, and it does require proper controls and secure workflows. So if you're working with an AI tool, or you're working, somebody brings it to you, you should be asking, is this the enterprise version? Do we have an NDA with them? Because those are two big aspects of making sure that the information that is being handled is going to be done so on a protected basis. But once it's in place, you're still going to have many obligations. You still have to apply with all of these applicable laws. There's big areas of best practices that are going to apply, whether it's AI or some of these other data and cyber things like as notices. But then there's also, as we all know, overseeing bias and auditing the outputs and data retention requirements, and making sure that there's no harmful or discriminatory decisions. And so, again, to help make sure that you have some productive conversations, provided here are a couple of questions to consider, and you will need to be thinking about and want to have defensible answers, not necessarily within your organization, but if there's regulators, if there is some sort of complaint or lawsuit. So thinking about some of these things about the use of data, encryption, retention, auditing, admin access, the policies and procedures, and how these various outputs are used. It's a starting point to help have these very productive conversations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Bryce to talk through some specifics from that outside in looking perspective.
First, what we're going to get into is we're going to talk about some trends before we get into the outside, and just to paint a little bit of that picture. The reason I really want to spend time on this before we get into it is because you can't monitor something that you don't have an accurate picture of it. And the picture most organizations have of their own AI usage is really incomplete. So the concept that's going to run through this whole section really is shadow AI. It's the AI equivalent of shadow IT in a way, tools being used by employees that the organization isn't aware of, hasn't approved, and isn't monitoring. So let me show you what some of this data actually looks like that is being reported on. So this slide is Gallup data. I believe the link is somewhere here, or we can certainly get it for everybody. The Gallup data is tracking AI use at the workplace over time. So the trend here, as you can see, is that it's going up, and it's been going up consistently. The point here is to show that AI tools have moved kind of past the early adopter phase, and they're in everyday use across industries and different roles. So what that means for us is that the gap between adoption and governance in a way is widening. Every time a new technology reaches this kind of adoption speed, the organizations that build their governance policies late end up having more incidents instead of preventing them. And more incidents, a lot of times can come from the inside, but it definitely comes from the outside the majority of the time. Now, despite all of the growth, this Gallup's data also tells us that most employees don't know whether their organization has formally adopted AI. They don't know what tools have been approved, if AI has been adopted, or what processes that they're even supposed to follow. So you have widespread growing usage, and then a widespread lack of awareness about whether there's even rules that they're supposed to be following. So it creates this unintentional shadow AI. Employees aren't necessarily always trying to circumvent anything. They find a tool that helps them work faster. They use it, and they have no idea that they may have just sent sensitive company to an external model or created questions around ownership of data. Everybody's here probably better at arguing whether they knew that or not than me, but it's certainly a question that gets brought up, and it really becomes not just a technology problem, it's an internal organization communication problem as well, and it's really preventable at the end of the day if we start getting ahead of it.
And so I'll comment really quickly here on our next two pages, just to make sure that we kind of move along into the meat of some of this. So looking at shadow AI, and Bryce on the next page with the statistics here. As you mentioned, we're all figuring this out together. And so some people know, some people don't. And this just kind of tries to put it into context that, there's still a lot that's being figured out, and organizations may not have visibility, oversight, and control. And just for fun, if we look at the next page, we can see that shadow AI and intentional or unintentional use of shadow AI isn't necessarily a generational issue. Everyone here is guilty to some extent or another. And so this is why these productive conversations and making sure that we're thinking ahead on some of the topics we're going to explore is so important. So, Bryce, I'll let you take it over into the outside in perspectives, and we'll make sure that we're moving ahead to cover all our content.
All righty. Well, before we get into that, I think we have a polling question here for the group.
Yes, the question, you have 90 seconds on this one, team. How is AI currently being used within your organization? Single choice. How is AI currently being used within your organization? Formally approved and governed tool. Informal/employee-driven shadow AI. Limited or no current use. Unsure. Remember, you have to answer the polling questions for the CLE accreditations.
We'll take about 15 more seconds. So if you have not already gotten your answer in, go ahead and get that in now. Alrighty, folks, we'll go ahead and close that one.
Thank you, everybody.
Very interesting. Looks like a lot of folks have formally approved things in place, which is good to see, and a good trend that we should hope to see continue to grow. So as we talked about really quickly before we get into this, there's a number of risks out there. This is something provided by McKinsey, and we will talk through some of these in various contexts. But really quickly, just going to highlight some of these that we think folks should be paying particular attention to, which we cover in this session. And so, if we move to the next page, you can see those highlighted. And cybersecurity in particular is going to be the next big focus. And it looks like we already have our second polling question for the group too.
Second polling question. How confident are you in your organization's ability to detect misuse of AI tools? How confident are you in your organization's ability to detect misuse of AI tools? Single choice. First, very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, and choice 4.
I believe as an attorney, I have no choice but to interpret choice 4 as it depends.
All of the above. You're very confident, somewhat confident, and not confident at all.
And just a quick reminder to make sure that you get your answers in for each of these polling questions. We'll give it about 15 more seconds. Alrighty, team, we're going to go ahead and close this one out.
Interesting. All right.
All right. Outside in, if you didn't hear the explanation at the beginning, outside in and how we're going to talk about it is the external threat landscape as it relates to AI. Specifically, how are threat actors using AI? How does your organization's AI adoption create new attack surfaces that your existing tools may not cover? And then we'll kind of cover some of the concept of tools that most organizations rely on for security today weren't designed with AI in mind. So the first thing we'll touch on here is some highlights of how we're seeing threat actors out there actually using some AI. We'll start with APT36 Vibeware. They're a nation-state threat actor that's been observed using AI to develop malware in niche programming languages, so NIM, Zig, Crystal, languages that are the most traditional detection tools. They just don't have signatures for. So what's important here, and a part of where AI comes into play, is that this group is reportedly producing one new malware variant per day. So if you think about what that means for signature-based protection, which is more traditional, by the time a signature gets written, there's already several more variants of the malware available in the wild. And AI has turned that development process into hours, which may have previously been days. Beyond malware, we're seeing AI-assisted phishing, social engineering, overall business email compromise at scale and quality that wasn't possible before. AI can, research a target, write a highly personalized email, and they can do that across thousands of targets now with really minimal human effort. So the bar to impersonate someone has dropped significantly because of AI. We're also seeing attacks targeting AI-enabled enterprise tools directly, attempts to manipulate those tools into behaving in ways that they shouldn't. I'll get more into that, but the broader point is that no one benefits more from AI speed and scale than the threat actors. And they're not treating security the same way we do. The attack surface is expanding faster than most organizations today are either capable or care about defending it at times, and the words can often be used interchangeably. So to me, from the outside in technical perspective, this is one of the most important pieces of the talk today, and it's something not a lot of organizations have come to full terms with yet, and that's the security tools that are being relied on weren't built for the environment that we're talking about with AI. So there's really two gaps with that. There's the endpoint detection and response tools, so EDR platforms like SentinelOne, CrowdStrike are genuinely good at what they're designed for, standard workflows, known attack patterns, traditional threat behaviors, but they can struggle to track agentic actions is what they're referred to as. So it's really the actions that the AI has taken. When an AI agent is operating on its own, it's browsing, executing, interacting with APIs. That activity, it doesn't look like traditional malicious or suspicious endpoint activity. And critical EDRs, they don't log what's being sent to AI models, or it doesn't log what's coming back. So that entire layer of interaction where people think that they have this strong defense now because they have EDR, it just isn't visible to the EDR tool. And then second, another layer that people have started putting on top of EDR are identity tools. So they have improved a lot, but they weren't built with the idea of an AI agent acting on a user's behalf. So when that happens, the way permissions interact, it really gets complicated. A user might have certain access rights, and then an agent operating on behalf of that user with that user's credential can potentially reach further within an environment than they could have otherwise. So current identity tools typically aren't going to flag that the way they should. So it at the end of the day, it means that organizations are going to have blind spots. But to fix that, you need to know it exists to begin with. So that's what this is really, really getting at. So given those gaps, what are we actually trying to detect, right? So the primary outside in context is, we'll start referring to it and you'll start hearing to it really as indicators of prompt. It's signs that a threat actor is trying to get an AI agent or AI enabled tool, if you will, to act differently than it's supposed to. It's trying to get it to access data that it shouldn't, take actions or do things that it shouldn't, really to just behave in a way that benefits the threat actor outside of what it's supposed to be doing for the user. So it's different from traditional indicators of compromise in a way, because those typical IOCs, again, I mentioned signatures before, but it's also known bad IPs, file patterns, those TTPs, indicators of prompt are behavioral rather than known static things. And the patterns of their patterns of interaction really that suggest somebody is trying to manipulate them. A clear example of ways this is getting used differently that aren't always necessarily being picked up on. It is even as simple as, talking about business email compromises. They've traditionally involved threat actor gets into an email account, they're sending fraudulent payment instructions or trying to fish for additional credentials, whatever their goal may be. With AI, the communication, kind of like we hit on before, with how quickly they can do it, it becomes much more convincing and faster for them to produce. In a Microsoft 365 VEC, one of the most common VECs that we see, Copilot is built right in now, right? It's just there for anybody to use. So threat actors now have the ability to quickly find out who they are, what they do, who they talk to, how they talk, which drastically changes and reduces the time that needs to be spent within an environment, which in turn reduces their chances of getting caught. And it's just all because of Copilot at the end of the day, really. So monitoring, you're looking for patterns that don't fit normal usage, attempts to push AI tools outside of, we'll call it their boundaries, unusual data access that may be correlated to AI rather than human usage. It's really, emerging, I would say. It's difficult to get there, and tools, the tools we may use are still catching up, but there are some that are out there and doing that. And we'll talk on that as well. So this really gets at the agentic threats that I mentioned. How are they showing up? So first, I kind of hit on it a minute ago. Insider threat can be, AI allows it easier, if you will. The AI tools, when IT teams are deploying them, the permissions aren't always defined very well. So an employee, either with bad intentions or just because nobody told them what the AI tool is supposed to do, they can use that to use the tool to reach data that they may not have otherwise. So you can think about the days of permissions and role-based access. If the AI tool isn't defined correctly, then they pretty much completely move outside of that access control altogether, and it can create this opportunity for insider threat. And then second, on top of that, is data exposure. And every SaaS application, cloud service, API connection, an AI tool can reach that a lot of the time now. So it becomes part of that attack surface that I mentioned, and organizations are creating new exposure faster than they're documenting the use of it. So to get away from the doom and gloom a little bit here, the good news is that there are tools coming along and emerging in the marketplace that enable us to track some of this. So this is a screenshot of prompt security. It's an example of what AI security monitoring can look like, because it gives a very high level of what monitoring can be. What you're looking at here is their platform's interface, and it's probably a little outdated now, but it's what I pulled from their website. It's what they're what it looks like, and it's something that didn't exist in the mainstream security tooling until recently. That visibility at the prompt level. And what's being sent to the AI model. So what data is flowing in, whether any of that data is sensitive, customer information, credentials, or otherwise. Prompt security themselves also tracks around 18,000 AI applications. A lot of them are browser-based. A lot of them are based on Chromium. So think about that as you will, but still, they're building their base to be able to do that. They're tracking built-in AI capabilities and different platforms, code assisters, other AI services that you're not going to get with that traditional AI. So the intention here with this screenshot isn't to sell anybody on prompt. The tooling is evolving fast, which is what I'm trying to get at. There's other tools out there. Jetstream is another one that comes out. that has come out. But the point is, if you're serious about AI security and monitoring, you need to start looking into these tools. And some of these startups, even Prompt is one of them. Pangea was another. They're beginning to get evaluated, purchased, acquired into the major security platforms. So SentinelOne has actually bought Prompt, and for now, it's a tool that exists alongside SentinelOne. I anticipate it'll be in SentinelOne Singularity specifically one day. And Pangea similarly it's been acquired by CrowdStrike, and then that integration is still early on. But if you're waiting for it to be in the EDR tool, you'll be waiting a bit longer. Pass it over to you, Ryan, to chat on Inside Out.
Thank you. And before we get to that, we have our last polling question, number 3 here. So if we can pull that up.
Number 3, what is the biggest internal risk your organization faces with AI adoption? Data leakage, confidentiality risk, employee misuse or lack of awareness, regulatory or compliance exposure, or bias decision-making risk. That was, what is the biggest internal risk your organization faces with AI adoption? Got 90 seconds, we're just under now.
Alrighty, folks, let's give it about 10 more seconds here. And just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions, to please look at the chat feature and email mchristie@constangy.com, and I'll make sure I get connected with their speakers today. All right, Madison, you can go ahead and close the poll. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Interesting. Well, it's all things that we will talk about here in this next section around monitoring these internal uses of AI. So if we jump ahead here really quickly, I just want to just remind you about what we looked at, and we're going to be kind of driving this next section and talking through the conversation is going to be driven by each of these major concerns that were identified. So we'll start off with, we'll just start off, biggest to smallest here, and cybersecurity is, of course, one of the larger ones. So if we go ahead and look at some of the cybersecurity considerations here on this next page, as Bryce already mentioned, there's a number of things that we need to look for, but monitoring, there's quite a bit here, and supply chain vulnerabilities are a major aspect here. These number of integrations and connections that we have with third parties and service providers, creates these risks as we're aware of. And so the way that we can mitigate some of those risks is through, as attorneys, is through our terms, our contracting, making sure that we're not accepting liability and that we're appropriately shifting it to where it should lie. We mention this because, in a lot of cases, people want to move fast, and these deals do move fast. And I often talk with colleagues who will have teams come to them and say, "Oh, we've already reached a deal. We just need you to approve this contract so we can launch next week." Well, that's going to hold things up because there's, a lot of liability that may be involved. So going back to our conversation about productive conversations, the earlier you can involve folks in what's happening, and you can be working together on these terms and working through these considerations and move through everything a lot quicker. Moving on to concerns around personal privacy, data privacy regulation has exploded in the past few years, and a lot of the AI regulation and AI considerations out there right now from a policy perspective are extensions of things in privacy or extensions of things in security. And so things like transparent surveillance and like thinking about this in terms of like your employees. So using AI to monitor your employees, whether that is computer monitoring, whether that is badge swipes, by speaking to some folks who use biometric scanners at the entrances to their facilities as means of tracking whether their return to office mandates are being met, but making sure that you are being upfront with that. And so people are on notice that not only are those technologies being used, but that they involve AI, and so that their concerns can be addressed. And as we already talked about before, AI is also being used in other contexts, some of which involves those hiring decisions. We talked about that with the Colorado law and consequential decision making. But once people are in, it's also being used for performance monitoring, which, both sides of that involve consequential decisions. So as we're moving through, I know we're moving through quickly, but monitoring AI, as we talked about earlier, the space of AI is so broad. What we're trying to provide here is the questions, the considerations involving AI that you should be monitoring, and to give you a sense of the scale and the number of considerations that exist within an organization. Looking at the next side of this is intellectual property infringement. And we already talked about the public versus private instances of AI, but really it comes down to, the ownership of inputs and ownership of outputs, trying to be careful about making sure that your individuals are not putting in sensitive information into these tools. And when we talk about sensitive information, we're not only discussing, personal data and personal information, but that may also involve confidential and proprietary information of the business and the organization. And similarly, the outputs that you get from these tools, whether you are lawfully and legally able to use those in your organization. So again, considerations to be thinking about when you're trying to monitor how is AI used and to structure your program and an effective AI governance program to help guide your organization through all of these considerations. If we look at, the next side of this is regulatory compliance. I wish from a personal perspective that the percentage of concern were a bit higher, but there's a number of compliance areas where organizations can get themselves into trouble. And again, thinking about this from a variety of contexts, there's bias in hiring, there's fraud from the FTC, and then we've talked about consequential decision making at a number of points here. If we look now to the last area here, which is monitoring AI usage internally, a lot of this comes down to trust. It's trust with your employees, it's trust with your customers, it's trust with your third parties and service providers. And, to see what's at stake, there's this these survey up here about what people prioritize. Oh, if you can go back really quickly. Not a problem. And again, just trying to provide here some of the things that you can be thinking about as you're monitoring AI use in your organization so that you can promote trust. And some of these pragmatic principles are listed here, evaluating risk, making sure there's accountability and coordination amongst teams, being transparent with everyone, and doing testing, not just before, but also during and after, and continuing to review so that you have defensibility, whether that's documentation or testing or policies, procedures, controls. I know there was a question in the chat I saw about how organizations can, manage shadow AI, and some of that comes down to, policies which establish, ground rules and guardrails to prevent that, and also the consequences for failing to abide by that. So there's a number of ways to engender trust and support effective monitoring. And touching on just one last aspect here, when it does come to monitoring, if we look at the next page here, is the MIT Risk Register, which is a fascinating analysis of what's out there in terms of the various risks with involving AI. I do find it interesting when I look at these numbers and see them updated from time to time that more often than not, the most heightened areas of risk happen after an AI system has been deployed, which to me indicates that there is a lot of opportunity for organizations to be doing things before you reach that point to minimize, mitigate, or prevent that from happening in the first place. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to consider. But we really hope that what we presented here will enable you to have very productive conversations and think about what you should be monitoring. And of course, we are available here to talk about any of these questions in more detail because there's only so much we can cover in the time that we have. But that does take us to the end here. And I know we just want to do a quick recap of everything that we talked about today. And oh, sorry, I did have one last thing here. Defensibility, as people are looking for guidance, as the regulatory landscape continues to evolve, if you're looking for ways to kind of create that structure and how you can be thinking about establishing an approach and a framework that's consistent, manageable, and scalable, NIST has a framework which itself is mapped to many other AI frameworks. And so that can be a good starting point if you're just trying to figure out where do we get started. So, and with that, we will move to the takeaways and overviews from everything that we've covered here today. And Bryce, I'll let you walk us through.
So first, understanding AI, we touched on that a little bit about getting the two teams together, determining what AI is to you, and making sure that people are talking. The second, external threats. AI adoption is creating unique security challenges within the organizations, and existing tools may not be covering it. Third, Ryan talked about internal risks, the risks from AI use inside the organization and the legality of a lot of that. We touched on shadow AI, exposure, access control, things that aren't happening right now. And then to me, most importantly, monitoring. Again, I know I just highlighted them, but AI is here to stay. We can't wait around for the approach, and every week that goes by without governance and understanding of it is just creating more and more risk as a part of that.
And just to emphasize, as we mentioned several points at this and is underlined here on this page, thinking about AI usage really does have to be considered holistically. All of these areas, everything that we've covered, and many areas that we didn't have time to cover today, but we hope to in a future webinar. But it's been a pleasure to present to you today. Both myself on behalf of Constangy and Bryce. So we do have our information here. If there are other questions, because I know I've seen them coming up in the chat, resources from our organizations on what we're seeing and thinking about in this space. And please do not hesitate to reach out to us at any time if you'd ever like to discuss more. But otherwise, it has been an absolute pleasure. Bryce, it was great to pull this together and to really look at this from both sides and not focus on just one or the other. So really appreciate everyone's time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you both. That was great, very enjoyable. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.